Hi friends, foes, and alike, I'm Cody Deal, and we are going to be watching a video about first principles, which is, I hear, a very intelligent way of seeing the world and how it can help you discover new ways to do the ordinary and make it even better. That's our goal here today. Let's watch this as a family. Let's grow and learn as a family because I'm all about family. Let's get it.
I do think there's a good framework for thinking is physics, the sort of first principles reasoning. What I mean by that is boil things down to their fundamental truths and reason up from there, as opposed to reasoning by analogy. Through most of our life, we get through life by reasoning by analogy, which essentially means kind of copying what other people do with slight variations. And you have to do that, otherwise it's mentally...
Copying people by slight variations. That's how we kind of start, I guess.
You wouldn't be able to get through the day. But when you want to do something new, you have to apply the physics approach.
The physics approach.
Give me an example of that. Like, what's one thing that you've done that on that you feel has worked for you?
Sure. So somebody could say, in fact people do, that battery packs are really expensive and that's just the way they'll always be, because that's the way they've been in the past. You're like, well, no, that's pretty dumb. And you say, no, okay, well.
Okay. So we're breaking things down into its raw materials and not listening to why something is the way it is right now, but going back to the foundation, the first principles, I suppose, of the battery, and yeah.
What are the batteries made of? So first principles would be to say, okay, what are the material constituents of the batteries? What is the spot market value of the material constituents?
Spot
so
market value.
Cobalt,
are these terms you guys have never heard of? Because I sure haven't.
Nickel, aluminum, carbon, and some polymers for separation, and a steel can. So break that down on a material basis and say, okay, what if we bought that in the London Metal Exchange, what would each of those things cost? Like, oh, geez, it's like $80 per kilowatt hour. So clearly, you just need to think of clever ways to take those materials and combine them into the shape of a battery cell, and you can have batteries that are much, much cheaper than anyone realizes.
Okay, so as I look through this idea or this philosophy, I go, okay, that's cool. If you want to save on batteries, you just take what's in a battery and then you source out how you can combine those materials in the least costly way, and there you go. But then when I think about, okay, how can I do X, and I go back to some first principles, my mind doesn't do anything. It doesn't start rewriting first principle theory from, let's say I want to grow on YouTube. What are the first principles of growing on YouTube? I don't know. I'm trying to correlate what I should be thinking about. And it's hard. I don't even want to speak about what I try to think about because nothing comes. So let's keep learning. I don't know.
Rockets were super expensive, and the cost per pound or kilogram to orbit had actually gone up over the years, not down. So after my second or third trip back from Russia, I was like, whoa, there's got to be a way to build rockets. There's got to be a way to solve the rocket problem. I started reading a lot of books on rockets and did sort of a first principles analysis of a rocket, just broke down the materials that are in a rocket, what would it cost to buy those materials, what versus the price of the rocket, and there's a gigantic difference between the raw material cost of the rocket and the finished cost of the rocket. So there must be something wrong happening in going from the constituent atoms to the final shape.
Okay, so he's saying if I buy all these materials myself and build it, it would be extremely cost effective. This is great for building things, but how is it to build an idea? I don't know. I'm not a first principles theorist, so my brain isn't working that way. But I want to install the first principle foundation framework within me so that when I start something, I can look at it from its smallest components.
And I found that certainly to be true.
And then, just in general, critical thinking is good.
This is true.
Examining whether you have the correct axioms, the most applicable axioms.
Is a statement that is taken to be true. Okay, so there's trillions of axioms of what we say. This is true. This is true because everyone else has thought it was true, and so it must be true. Therefore, I'm going to believe it's to be true, and so I filter my own personal reality around this axiom. Maybe what they're suggesting in first principles is that not every axiom is true. In fact, most axioms maybe are not. And so to be able to discover all the axioms that are said to be true, to be able to work those out independently or to look at them through critical analysis, maybe you can see things a bit differently than the average bear. And maybe there is some great intelligence that comes with that, and you can build on these areas differently because your axioms are different or differently associated than the average bear. And I think that's a critical thinking and thinking differently, not just to think differently to be unique, but to generally see kind of, okay, here's first principles maybe for spirituality. No one's telling me really that we're more than just this physical body. You have different arenas that talk about it, but I do see in my personal experience that I sense things before I should. Sometimes something's going to happen before it does. Sometimes you have a gut feeling or a visceral feeling. Sometimes in sports, you want to do something because there's something that overtakes you, but it's not the logical thing to do. So there's a lot more things that we're molded by and shaped by that we can sense through the human experience than we're told. And so maybe the axioms of truth around that allow me to tap, that tells us that we're just this physical component, allows me to tap into the mystery of life in these different forces because I believe my axioms are more in alignment with just being a physical body, but a energetic body. And so we can feel, sense, and orient ourselves to different things because my axioms to me are true, and so I can tap into that trueness. I don't know. I'm trying to just think of first principles in different ways. Is there a philosophical foundation of first principles? Has anybody written a book about that? Or is it just, I don't know. This stuff confuses me. This is why we're watching as a family. I don't know what I'm talking about. If you know anything about first principles, tell me how far off I am in the comments below, and help. If you can also generate an idea of first principles, maybe it's how to do X. Just show me the first principle stats for that. Because if we can get some examples of this, I think we all would kind of understand this beyond batteries and rockets.
Does the logic necessarily connect? And then what are the range of probable outcomes? Outcomes are usually not deterministic. They're a range. And so you want to figure out what those probabilities are.
That's interesting that not all outcomes are just one absolute. That's always a range. And I think that's a good axiom to abide by as well. That just because 10 people do the same thing over and over 10 different times, there's going to be a range of outcomes, not just one single outcome, which is kind of interesting to think about because we deal in such absolutes.
And make sure, ideally, that you're the house. It's fine to take. It's fine to gamble as long as you're the house.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah. So set the odds in your favor, I suppose. Should we piggyback off and find another first principles video? Let's do it. I think this one. Let's just watch this one.
This video was made possible by the great courses.
In the links below
Plus,
this video
click the
will
link in
show
the
the
description to
original
get your
sources.
free trial.
Okay.
In the previous video, we discussed the idea of power and created a framework for thinking about it. I claimed that someone needed two fundamental ingredients to be powerful: a true understanding of the world and the resources to shape it. As promised, we're going to go over what I left out of the last video, which is how to obtain a truer understanding of the world. I believe this essay will shine light on the fact that some ways of thinking are more useful than others. Out of all the essays that I've ever written, this one is the most important. Today we'll be discussing how to think from first principles.
How powerful people think. Love it. This is a really cool video. Thank you, Justin.
First principles are the fundamental building blocks of an idea. They're the most indivisible part that we know to be true and that we use to build more complex thoughts. I know this sounds a little abstract right now, but let me give you some history,
it really
an analogy,
does.
and an example. Thinking from first principles isn't a new or groundbreaking idea. In fact, it's been the dominant mode of thinking among all great scientists and philosophers for a while now. It's probably the single most consistent factor among great thinkers. Although there have been many practitioners of this way of thinking, I'd like to zoom in on one that you may have heard about.
Please.
Aristotle. He was a prolific organizer who believed that everything could be divided into categories and subcategories. The smallest subcategory in any domain is what we would call a first principle. He was also one of the earliest...
The smallest subcategory of any...
smallest subcategory in any domain is what we would...
The smallest subcategory of any domain is a first principle. The smallest subcategory of a domain is a first principle. Okay.
Call a first principle. He was also one of the earliest empiricists that we know about. An empiricist is someone who believes that all knowledge is achieved through experience. As one of the earliest major contributors to someone who believes that
an empiricist is someone who believes that knowledge is achieved through experience.
As one of the earliest major contributors to the study of biology, it makes sense that Aristotle was a first principles thinker. He would dissect animals to gain real-world knowledge and then use his capacity for reason to organize and categorize the information. This cycle of seeking knowledge through experience and using reason to give it structure is how one comes to know the first principles of a subject. Aristotle believed that we couldn't possess true knowledge unless we understood these principles. Now that you have a slight understanding of the history, let me give you an analogy about thinking from first principles.
Okay.
Think of your knowledge in a specific domain as a tree. Someone who thinks from first principles, an unconventional thinker, will understand that body of knowledge from the fruit all the way down to the root.
Okay, a tree metaphor. That really allows us to see the different components of the tree, from the trunk to the leaves to the fruit to the roots.
The fruit is what we see in front of us. It's the unearned knowledge that we can obtain, experience, and repeat right away. We can look at an apple tree, say that it's just a thing that produces apples, and call it a day. It's a very shallow understanding of the tree, but it's not untrue. On the other hand, a first principles thinker will want to know how this creation really came to be. They'll see that the apple is connected to a branch, and every branch is a subset of a greater whole called a...
It's hard to think critically, my friends. It's hard to, your brain just wants to go, oh, I'm overwhelmed. Let me just shut it down and learn it. But we got to get through the uncomfort and just figure out what the fuck is going on. That's how we learn, is it's all overwhelming, and then we just keep in the same field. We keep gaining information, and then eventually certain things start clicking, but we got to get on. Do you remember you learned multiplication at one time in your life, subtraction, addition? Do you think if you looked at a trigonometry equation right now, you'd be like, I would never be able to learn this? Well, it's really just as simple as learning mathematics at a basic level, because at one time you did not know basic math. The same trial and error experience to learn basic math is how you learn higher math. Essentially, how you learn anything is going through this robust process of uncomfort and a little acquirement of knowledge, uncomfort, a little bit of acquirement of knowledge, and eventually you become more of you understand what's going on. I just feel like as adults, we have so much more. Okay, I don't think as adults we do. I just feel like no one is saying, do this right now or you're getting a bad grade. You're flunking this class and all your friends are going to be moving forward and you're not. So we have a lot of incentive to go, oh God, oh man, this hurts my brain, but I got to pay attention. I'm forced to be here. These are kind of good things as a kid. They're actually good things as an adult. If we had someone who was forcing us to learn something for a job, we tend to want to, we know that we have to put in the time. But when it becomes to personal skills on your own personal time, we just don't have the same discipline, because we're always a bit more disciplined. We have a coach, I feel.
The trunk. Finally, they'll see that the root is the most fundamental part of the tree, which gives rise to the fruit. They've gathered multiple pieces of information about the tree through experience, but they've also organized the pieces of information in relation to each other. These free-floating facts have been transformed into an organized body of knowledge. The conventional thinker will believe that they can put the apple seeds anywhere and grow delicious apples. They lack true understanding. Upon examining the roots, the first principles thinker will see that a delicious fruit starts with good soil. They have a nuanced understanding.
Good soil.
The conventional thinker is the guy at the
Did you guys even think about the soil when it came to the tree up front?
cocktail party who has all of the interesting facts. His knowledge consists solely of fruit that he can display. On the contrary, the unconventional thinker is consistently focused on building trees of knowledge. Like Aristotle, he or she goes back and forth between experience and reason to build an organized and structured body of knowledge. A tree planted in good soil will have strong and healthy roots and thus produce delicious fruit. Likewise, an idea that blooms from true and beautiful first principles will itself be beautiful and true. Naturally, if the simple parts that make up a complex whole are good and true, then the complex whole must be good and true as well. This is important because, as we discussed in the last video, a true understanding of the world is necessary to obtain power. Any complex beliefs we hold can only be true if the parts that make them up are true. To make this more concrete, let's think about the process of writing an essay from first principles. A well-written essay.
I love that he's doing examples. That's what we needed. I mean, that first video sounded good in theory, but I need actual examples of how you would apply first principles to X. And here we go.
Is like a delicious fruit. It's enjoyable to consume from first principles. A well-written essay is like a delicious fruit. It's enjoyable to consume and difficult to produce without understanding its fundamentals. We can identify the fundamentals by breaking it down into its component parts. An essay is a collection of paragraphs. Well, a paragraph is a collection of sentences. A sentence is a collection of words, and words are a collection of letters, and letters are the fundamental building blocks of an essay.
Okay, so we've been taught how to think in first principles. We all were taught, if you went to school, how to write an essay. The things that you needed. Usually you have a middle, beginning, and an end. Sometimes you have a hypothesis up front, and then you have a conclusion at the end. You know, if it's a scientific paper or whatever. Yeah, so maybe this is first principle thinking, but I don't think we do it in everything that we decide to learn. We just take, again, these axioms that we were taught, and in fact, I guess we could take the axioms you were taught, which is this, and this is how you're supposed to write an essay, but then you could look at all these different subcategories or first principles, I guess, and go, well, it starts with letters and it starts with words. Is there a better way to write an essay? Is there a better experience for the reader and the writer? Is there, just because everyone's done it like this, is there a better way? And I think someone who understands first principles and all the fundamental areas maybe could come up with a better way of writing. In theory, right? I think. It would take someone very intelligent to really change the methodology that's universal, but maybe there is a different way of writing a book that's a little bit different than the way we've done it for 2,500 years or whatever. That would take a genius, but perhaps someone really worked at the framework of writing, and then now his way is the most universally accepted because it makes more sense now. Who knows? I mean, Elon Musk is doing a lot of things that we were told he can't do, which is have electric vehicles, take a person to the moon or Mars again. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw that recent rocket video. I wish I was good enough to pull that up right now, but it was incredible. I mean, I never thought we would see something like that in our lifetime. It looked very Star Trek-y or, science fiction, where it just redocked itself like a badass. So I think there's some good thought in here, and I think we should all just, keep with, like, where is this going? I don't really know how to play it. Just hold on before you start judging the process, and let's just keep getting through this video, see if we learn anything.
Once the components of an essay are understood, we can look at improving each one from the simplest to the complex. If we can make each individual component remarkable, then the totality should be remarkable, and that is the art of first principles thinking. Now,
so he's saying not changing the whole methodology, but perfecting each subcategory or first principle.
Let's talk about the benefits. There are several benefits that come from understanding an idea down to its fundamental components. The first is innovation.
Like, I would love to explain fitness in a first principles way, and give people a strategy that actually makes it achievable, because I think 80% of our nation is now overweight, which is pretty insane to think about. I understand all the reasons why, but also why isn't it more important to people? Why don't we have? There's just so much. So how can I break that down into first principles to give guidance or a workable solution to help people with their? Because this is our temple, my friends, and if it's unhealthy, that damages the quality of our lives. It damages our life expectancy. It damages our energy levels and our moods. There's a lot of disorders that come from what we ingest. It can lead to a lot of different mood disorders because there's so much chemicals in our food. And so, what can I do for humanity in my small way to help people with that through a first principles approach? That's a really interesting question to myself. And when I think about it, still, I don't have the algorithm of first principles built into my brain, and I don't even know how to break down fitness in its first principles. I would need someone who's done this to go, okay, let's look at this in the first principles approach. Here's your goals and your outcomes. How can we become the house and make this possible for more people than not? I don't know. My brain does absolutely nothing. It doesn't. It can't. It does. Maybe I'm being lazy, and I need to put in more work in workshopping this. But my point is, it's not habitual yet.
Once you understand the fundamentals of an idea, you can rearrange them, change them, or put them together differently to create a new idea or a product. In our writing example, we could have created another layer above the essay. We could call a collection of essays a book. We've now invented something new. The second benefit is optimization. A fundamental component can be changed in order to improve an idea or a product. For example, once we knew the fundamental components of the essay, we could put each of them under scrutiny to see how each component could be its best. But without knowing these components, it's impossible to make any sort of improvement. The third benefit is integration. Once you understand the foundational components of an idea, it becomes a lot easier to integrate new knowledge into your understanding. For example, once you know how to write letters, it becomes easier to make words. Once you know how to write words, you can make sentences. Once you can make sentences, you can make paragraphs, then essays, then books, then entire libraries. And then the final benefit is dissemination. Understanding the foundational components of an idea makes it easier to transfer that complex idea to another person. You can start with the simplest component and build up the idea from there.
Cool.
This is exactly what we try to do in schools. We teach kids how to write the alphabet, then words, and so on. First principle thinkers are better teachers because they can determine the exact level where a student's understanding falls apart.
That's awesome.
So you see the benefits, but how can someone become a first principles thinker? Thinking from
Tell me.
first principles is simple, but not easy. I just have one piece of actionable advice, and it's inspired by Aristotle. Create hierarchies, like what we did with the essay example. Most ideas are nested inside or outside one another, and it's the job of a first principles thinker to map out how these ideas are linked.
Okay. So we'll listen to this, but let's think about fitness again. Okay, so we have culture. Oh, culture doesn't shame people anymore for being overweight. In fact, it celebrates overweight women because it's empowerment. Whereas maybe some women are clapping because they're no longer competition with them, or maybe other people are clapping because they're literally have high conscientiousness and they want that person to, because everyone knows the battle of weight gain. And so I'm sure there's genuine people and disingenuous people. But that's a first principle, I think, is culture. How does the culture define health, fitness, physique? Is it now wrongful to be in great shape because you're showcasing to other people that you are shaming other people because of the way you look? I mean, our culture's a little warped right now in some really interesting ways. And so maybe that's like, what's people's baseline? Like, I think the baseline of most today's culture and programming is people don't see the reason to change their health. But I think we're becoming a sick species because we're all overweight. And maybe I'm an asshole for bringing this to the forefront of, this conversation, or just even putting a focus on it that, but I do remember back in the day, there was a lot of pride in staying in shape and a lot of expectation, and people who were overweight were a lot more shamed for it. And yeah, that does hurt then, but at the end of the day, if you could shame someone to become a better version of themselves, at the end of the day, you just change your entire life expectancy. You just change. Now, I'm not saying someone who is overweight cannot be self-confident, but deep down, I think there is a fulfillment of confidence when you can own your own personal anatomy and try to reach its highest success point. Just like if you got really skillful at another job and you were really competent at that skill, you would just have more exuding confidence, right? So anyway, first principle is like how does the culture see anything? First principle is like the anatomy. How does the body actually work? What needs to be done? I think those are subcategories, right? Human anatomy, culture, healthcare system, maybe why corporations want us to be very sick and obese because they can treat us through a monthly paycheck that we give them. And I don't know. It's so robust that it overwhelms me. And that's probably why I don't ever get started, because I want the program to be perfect. I don't just want to tell you how many reps and sets to do. I want to start with like your mental frameworks and like why you perceive yourself and why you don't have motivation. And that's another one, a mental confidence framework. Maybe, okay, you can't do it. Like most people feel like they can't do it, so they don't even try. Like they've tried before and they always fail, and it's a shit show. Like how can I take the first principles of their experience that has said this is not possible, and then reframework that for possible, not just possible, but an absolute outcome? Because let's be real here. No matter how much experience or emotionality you have with losing weight, it's possible for anybody, unless you have like an injury or something, you can't move. Anyone can do it, but maybe literally you think that it's actually an improbability or an impossibility for you. And so, it's calories in, calories out, right? So it's possible for everybody, but maybe there's so many mental roadblocks that you have to overcome that you just literally, your axiom, your truth is that this is not even potentially possible. So we have to change that axiom or that first principle within yourself of how possible it really is. And it's just your mental programming and your past history that's bogged you down to think that you're incapable. You don't have you don't have the skill or the ability to lose weight. So these are the things that, I really want to help work people through, but it sounds overwhelming for me to be able to what's it called? When you take bits and pieces and you not corroborate, not calibrate, curate. You curate all the information for a person a certain way to deliver it so that they can make these changes over time for success. Anyway, I just want to talk about how confusing this was in the beginning of even thinking in the first principle way, and how far we've come already in a possibly thinking the first principle way. I don't even know if I'm doing it right. So any first principle degree holders, let me know if I'm far-fetched in how we're breaking this down.
As Aristotle, like all empiricists, would say, knowledge begins with experience. The world is presenting fruit all around you, amazing and complex acts of creation. Discovering the roots of these creations starts with questions such as why or how. The ultimate truth seeker must not be satisfied with fruit.
I like that. Let's boil down first principles to how and why. Why is it this way? How is it this way? How can I change it? Why is it important to change? How come it's always been this way? Wow. Wow. How and why. I like that.
Yet, they realize that the search for roots is never ending. Once they've reduced an idea down to the smallest fundamentals that they can conceive of, they have arrived at the first principles. These fundamentals can be used to innovate, optimize, learn more complex ideas, or to teach others. One of the best ways to discover these fundamentals is by actually writing down and organizing the information in a subject that you're interested in by using a hierarchy or a mind map, like how we did with the essay. So that concludes my little mini-series on power. I put forth a framework for power in the last video.
Okay, cool. So this was really cool. I think the next step for me is I've heard of mind mapping. And I think we should watch a video about mind mapping because when I was an entrepreneur, well, I guess I still am an entrepreneur. I had a person working for this really successful entrepreneur. She was the head of his marketing. And this guy was doing millions of dollars a year. He's the highest expert in his field, where he has these big conventions that everyone flies into, and he's madly successful. And I worked for him for a while, not too long, but a while. And because I wanted to learn about entrepreneurship and all that. But her and I would get together over coffee, and one of the things that she had me do is like, okay, if you want to do coaching and courses just like him on your niche, you need to mind map it out. And so she's the first person that taught me about mind mapping. And this was years ago. And I remember being very excited about it, but I never fully adopted that into my framework for building businesses or building products or services or programs. And so I think we should watch something like that and see where that might take us. Maybe you have a vision or a goal, you don't know how to get it started. Maybe we can work on a mind mapping together. But if you like this video, you thought it was really cool, I'd love for you to just comment below your confusion or your like breakthrough moment. Also, if there's any other videos that you want me to react to personally, just drop that in the comments below as well. And I'd be happy to take a look at it and see if I'd like to do a reaction video. And yeah, and if you really like this video, I'd give it a like. If you like the channel, we're just starting. We're a small channel, so I would value your subscription more than you possibly know. And I guess that's it. I will catch you guys on the next one. Thank you so much for checking me out.